The price of the book just went up. I'll get right to this, but I have to thank the Chancellor on behalf of ex-Chancellor, on behalf of the writing community, especially in university, as he supported it during all these years, and without his help, we would not be known at all much. I want to begin with a few paragraphs from a talk I gave to St. Louis University's library, then go on to read excerpts from Middle C, a novel that is our alleged excuse for being here. In short, we begin with me, mostly imaginary, and finish up with the imagined, and therefore most real me. While in graduate school at Cornell, I spent hours in the university library, as PhD drudges are required to do. I had a carrel, a small nick in the wall of the stacks that held a mean metal chair and a bulb, a sheet of steel to write or rest a book on, a rack in front of my face for volumes taken from the shelves, but on one's honor not to be removed from the building, and a jar of hard candy whose contents were dangerous when wet. To take notes, pencils only, was a rule I was willing to observe, since, unlike those of the Navy, an organization I had recently escaped from, it made sense. The building resembled a ship in some ways and bore me off smoothly. Not only were the stacks made of metal, the floor was of steel mesh that let an already worn-out light sink toward a basement as distant as a bilge. Steps naturally rang a little, unless you were in sneakers, but there were areas so removed from human interest, nutrition, for instance, it was a different era, that the only sounds you were likely to hear were those of the watchmen, who were apparently heavy men in boots. Nevertheless, sitting there day after day in dusky light, my conception of Eden began to change. It had no location on a map, but was a destination determined by the Dewey Decimal System. When I wasn't reading or falling asleep over a page of Lovejoy's Great Chain of Being, I roamed, up and down the metal steps, up and down the metal aisles. I stalked like a hunter through a dim light deemed beneficial for any volume's long interment, but barely feasible if you desired to read one, my fingers sometimes slipping along the edges of the books as a kid passing a fence might run a stick, my gaze on spines and their titles, a gaze full of wonderment that there were so many. The heavy-footed guys guarding the darkness didn't like readers to stay the night. You could nod over John Locke all afternoon, they wouldn't mind. But come 10 o'clock, they'd begin to sweep us out. First, they came scouting to see who was in the carols. They would mark you by your light. Since our little nooks were as open as a supermarket, if they didn't see you sitting there, they would turn off your lamp. Hiding at the right time by making yourself thin at the end of an aisle, or fleeing to another level like an amused draft, we would wait to return only after closing. Dodging the Gestapo's heavy tread became a game. But our abilities, and I was certainly not alone in this practice, were put to serious use each year when the library had its book sale. I knew succession, secession, recession, possession, concession, depression, and now I was to enjoy de-accession. A room on one of the lower levels would be set aside and furnished with several large library tables. Upon them, rows of books, spines up, would be packed. The humanities filled more tabletops than the sciences did, which was not a surprise because the scientists don't read, they tested, and reported their results in magazines that cost more than books. Rumors accused persons of unknown of hiding overnight in the stacks in order to be the first in line when the sale began the next morning. But that was not the worst these sneaks would sink to. They would actually take the books they wanted from one table, literature, philosophy, history, and hide them among economics or statistics. And one person I know was accused of taking volumes entirely away to another part of the building for the night, only bringing them back as if freshly chosen the following morning. Some tell-all told all. The competition was fierce, and friendship had no standing. Every book belonged to each of us, and often there were juicy prizes to be taken, since our teachers sometimes had the decency to die, and their heirs in ignorance or indifference to dump the bulky part of the inheritance in the bins of the library. But these books would never reach the shelves. They'd be denied admittance. We already have this edition of The Maid of Orleans. A writer once said about editors that out of refusal comes redemption. In this case, because the sale of books would not have been disfigured by the library's boastful black footprint, property of Cornell University Libraries, or pricked by the university's embossed seal, or pasted with a withdrawal and return record, or embarrassed by a tattoo inked on their spines as if they were headed for the boxcars. We busy buyers said we were rescuing the books that we were eagerly pulling out of the pack from who knew what calamitous destiny. Not death. That was nothing. The bleakest fate was to be always available, but never molested. I have been to many library sales since, and can vouch for the fact that these duplicates are rarely examined or their source respected, for out of them have fallen, as out of book fair books, treasures that sometimes surpass even their pages, not just the debris readers normally leave behind to keep their place, not only paper clips, kitchen matches, rubber bands, foil, curls of hair, bookmarks, bills, sucker sticks, lists, letters of love, postcards, postage stamps, gum wrappers, but also photographs and threatening notices, greenbacks, checks, and a draft of a telegram to be sent to the Allied High Commissioner asking him to expedite the transport of Werner Heisenberg out of Germany, which fluttered to my floor when I riffled one of Arthur Holly Compton's books after purchasing it for 50 cents at a Washington University purge. Collectors who do not care for books, but only for their rarity, prefer them in an unopened, in a pure and virginal condition. But such volumes have had no life, and now even that one chance has been taken from them, so that imprisoned by stifling plastic, priced to flatter the vanity of the parvenu who has made its purchase, it sits out of the light in a glass-enclosed humidor like wine, too old to open, too expensive to enjoy. Now I want to go to Middle C. Like my first novel, Omen Setter's Luck, this book is written in several styles. The library section is more traditional, more he said, she said. My character, a young man, Joey, sometimes Joseph, is a school dropout and a very amateur pianist who has just got a job in the library. It doesn't matter for this occasion, but you should be warned that much of what Joseph says when he is being interviewed for the job has the reality of a frequent liar. He isn't as smart, as old, as confident as he pretends to be. Two women, Miss Bruce, Miss Moss, manage the library. They are at war with one another. Miss Bruce is a boss. The people call her Major. These paragraphs in the novel are scattered about. I've gathered them together for this occasion. The library brought Joey Skizzen happiness. It is true, he had no instrument available to him now or place to play, though he exercised his fingers daily and caught every radio concert he could. So his music was not utterly neglected. The head librarian, Marjorie Bruss, presented a trim figure in her white blouse, navy slacks and jacket, and her halo of hair. Joseph liked her rosy complexion, her warm yet brisk manner, her play with words. Her speech was clipped but low, her face round as a dial, her smile consequently wide, and her lips had many expressive positions. She wore shoes with very soft soles and moved about quickly, but with almost as much discretion as Miss Moss, another librarian, managed. She saw Joseph's ballpoint and took it from his shirt pocket where it was clipped. No pens in the library. Pens are poison. We permit only pencils with soft leads and dull points, so any marks they make can be easily erased. Everybody? The rule is for everybody. We can't frisk our customers. I wouldn't want to put my hands on some, but in the reading room or anywhere, if you see someone taking notes with a pen, you must caution them. Indeed, highlighters are evil. They must be immediately confiscated and their users given a talking to, even if they are marking up their own books or some harmless paper copies. Oh, Marjorie raised her hand to heaven. How I hate highlighters. You don't use them, do you? Joseph wagged his head. Good, she said, good sign. The dog-ear people do it. Stupid students do it, and they will grow dog ears in due time. You don't do dogs, do you, Joseph? We never could afford a pet, Joseph said. Good sign, good sign. Dogs are bad for books. Don't ever do dogs. They chew. Cats are bad too. They claw. They love to rub their chins on the corner of covers, leave sneezers of fur, rub their chins and grin at you. Before they fade from view, Joseph said. Oh, you were a darling. I kiss the night nearby air, Marjorie exclaimed. But it would not be for the last time. The neighboring air got many a smooch. Marjorie's approval made Joey happy. He was a success. Do not lean with heavy hands or rest your elbows on a book, even closed, even at apparent peace. You know why, I suppose. It compresses the covers against the spine and may crack the adhesive. Oh, do not use a book as a writing board. Points can make indentations, especially, you'd be surprised, on jackets, many of which are waxy, slick, easily marked, for example, with a fingernail. And never put your notepaper on an open book, even to write a word. A dozen crimes in one action there. I wouldn't do that. Open books are so uneven. Never mark in a book, not your own. But even then, unless you think you're Coleridge, never make a marginal note or a clever remark that you will surely regret. And always assume the author is smarter than you are. Have you written a book on his subject? Well, so put down your differences on a piece of paper made for the purpose, or keep the quarrel quietly in your head, where it will bother you, only you, and never fluster another, not even your future self, who will have forgotten the dispute, you can be sure, and will not wish to be reminded. Yes, ma'am, Marjorie, not Miss, Ms., or ma'am, Marjorie. Marjorie. It was a nice name, he thought, well syllabled. Don't put your palms down on illustrations, reproductions, any page at all, really, because even the most fastidious sweat. Men sweat the most. Women have more discipline over their bodies. Did you know that? Except for their hands. Their hands are public advertisements. They encounter a porcupine, a precipice, a proposal, and their palms get runny. Oh yes, and in the old days, when men kissed a lady's hand, it was the top of it they put their lips to, not the palm. You never know where the palm has been or what it's been wrapped around. Well, where was, be wary, inks may smear, pigments flake, thumb oils may seep into the paper, leaving prints, and sweat attracts insects, did you know? Also, there may be a fungus in the neighborhood. Sweat is a magnet. Gee, I didn't know that. Joseph, that is your last G. Never even feel G. You are a grown-up. Okay. Okay is also out. G. Okay. Marjorie laughed like a wind chime. Good man, she said. Good man. Joseph had brought some new books to the basement for shelving. Miss Moss materialized beside him. Ah, Miss Moss, how are you? Every day is the same, she whispered, as if she were sharing a secret. Well, I suppose they are down here. No, the basement leaks a little when it rains. Isn't that bad for the books? Well, it would be if the books knew where the leaks were. Joseph felt himself in the middle of an admission of misunderstanding when it occurred to him that if the paper should sense and seek out nearby dampness, then, if it could, Miss Moss's point of view might... You're shelving these? Yes, that's right, because I re-shelve. I make all the readjustments. I dust them first, she flourished a rag, and then I wipe them all over. That's capital. It was another expression he'd encountered in an English novel. Miss Moss tried, he thought, to fix him with a look, but she had uneven eyes. Capital of what? I meant they'd be well wiped then. Of course, I would not wipe otherwise, she said softly but firmly while moving off. She always lowered her voice as a sign she was about to leave you. It was like slowly closing a door. These are first-timers, for down here, I mean, new to the stacks. He had begun to explain, but she was gone. It was perhaps the bare, inadequate bulbs that created her insubstantiality, in which case he was less material, too. You must not, Marjorie had advised him, pack the books too tightly together on the shelf. They must slide out easily. Dyes will rub off or surfaces scrape. A browser is bound to pull them out by tugging on the head cap Actually, they'll do it anyway. Their index finger shoots out and hooks the poor thing backward, weakening or even breaking the cap, tips the book out topsy-turvy. How would you like that? Some tend to hook the book by the tail cap, which is thereby determined to tear. Worse, women who wear their nails long, who have nothing to do but file and paint, love to claw books forth by clutching their sides, and in the process, puncture the cloth. You see? Where it rolls in at the hinge, it is loose, soft, and unprotected there. Such dismaying creatures. I quite understand. Read, Joseph, read, but don't use the words you read in front of a casual public. The words you read and the way they are written are rarely meant to be spoken out loud in ordinary life, the way one says hi or how are you with careless or indifferent intent. You may say it was quite large. That's all right. Quite. Good. You are a good Joseph today. You shall earn a cookie. Now then, where was I? Oh, books must not be shelved so loosely. They lean lazily to one side. That will cause them to become separated from their backbones and abrade their tail edges. Look here. She held up a volume by its covers, and he could see how its pages hung down like fish on a string. So remember to hold them as you hold your honey, not too loosely and not too tightly. I haven't got a honey. You've got a mother, maybe. Joseph learned that Marjorie puffed her cheeks while thinking ahead. She did that now. Then, don't. I'm sure you won't. Pick up a book by just one board, and be sure to carry heavy folios with both hands. By the way, you might think that turning pages is easy and obvious and needn't be learned. A cinch to master, you might think. But people regularly tear wide pages by pulling too fiercely and too sharply down on them. I can tell because the tears will come about a fourth of the way along the top from the spine. Thick books have deep creases, so the book is rarely fully open. So when holding a book, especially when turning the pages, do not put your thumb in the gutter. Marjorie demonstrated. The page rolled awkwardly over even her small thumb. Hands are important here, Joseph ventured. Ah, yes, good. Your hands will get dusty in this world of ours, and you will need to wash them often. Not just for the book's sake. You'll suffer paper cuts, infection sites, a nuisance but a peril of the job. You've probably seen the notices I put up in the bathrooms, yes? Dust jackets weren't idly named. We do risk the jackets for the first few weeks when the books are NAs, because even protected, they'll nick or fade a little. But then, after the volumes come back here to the open stacks, we store the jackets in basement boxes as if they were winter wear. Miss Moss, if she chooses, Miss Moss can show you where. Have you encountered Miss Moss? Yes, I have. We allow pencils, but watch out for the readers, usually women, who use the eraser to capture the corners and roll pages over, or worse, who lick their fingers. Admonish them, be gentle, but admonishment is necessary. I know the word jokes. Do I have my hair in a bun with a pencil thrust through it? But we have to admonish, we have to shush. We have few funds and can't replace books readily, so we must be particular, and we haven't the space to keep duplicates. We've got to sell them off, you know. Send them on their way. Patrons are always giving us duplicates. Miss Moss is in charge of the poor things, as well as the old folks and the orphans. Sometimes I think she is a faint, late duplicate herself. You dust each book when you put it back, Joseph asked Miss Moss, having thought of nothing better to say. Yes, I indeed do. I do, which is to tell you twice. I guess you did. I wiped them with this rag that Major doesn't like. She wants me to use the vac. Noisy, awkward to carry about, I suppose. Because the rag just rubs it in, she says, pushes the dust down between the pages. Dust will work its way into the least crack or crevice, but I wipe it in anyway. The top ends get gray, as do we all, including the Major. Why shouldn't they show their age? Well, yes, you're certainly right about that. You don't really think so. I'm sure you side with the Major. Well, I really haven't sides. We all have sides. I am at least hexagonal. Well, that many? Those who go to the well too often fall in. Yes, well warned. Major wants me to fashion cheesecloth over the nose of the hose and then push the attachment in. Really? Why? That seems extreme. The Major is extreme. If any fragments of paper, cloth, or leather fly off when I'm hosing, they will be caught in the net of the cheese. Of course, they'd be minute and of no worth, even if they were pasted back where they belong. Well, that is clever, very clever. Miss Moss held her swatch aloft. I am clever, too. Joseph now noticed how streaked her cloth was. Miss Moss had turned her back. Her dust rag lolled over her thin shoulder like a small towel. Marjorie'd have us wear white gloves if she wouldn't have to wear them. No, Marjorie would have us wear white gloves if she wouldn't have to wash them. Miss Moss managed to dial her voice up for that remark. As far as the library goes, I guess, she thinks all books are fine ones. Joseph thought Miss Moss hissed. She certainly sailed out of sight. Her world must be flat because she disappeared all at once rather than a bit at a time. Oh my, she said as if in deep distress. I'm going to have to show you how to load a book truck. Don't balance the books on the heads of other books, as you've done here. They aren't practicing to improve their posture. And if you row them like this, with their foredges down, see how the entire content hangs from the spine? These days, so many books are glued instead of sewn, and it is particularly hard on them to do what bats do. On the other hand, if you put them spine down on the truck, the back gets roughed up, the corners of the boards are also exposed, and these points are the most easily bumped and dented. That will happen to them soon enough. You can't know yet what people inflict on the poor things. Marjorie has told me some. It's Marjorie, but it's Miss Moss? Well, I don't doubt that she's told you. I don't doubt it. During this instruction, many of Miss Moss's mannerisms disappeared, and she seemed neither nervous, skittish, nor shy, nor did she break her words to elongate their vowels. Had she learned her cautions from Marjorie, or had Marjorie learned them from her? A certain malevolent glow suffused her features so that she grew younger and her complexion less blue whenever she spoke about her present position, its obligations, its rituals, trials, and its powers. A book, you would think, is not a pocket, a purse, or a wastebasket, but people dispose of their sniffle-filled Kleenex wads between unexposed pages, their toothpicks too, dirty where they've gripped them while cleaning their teeth. Such indecency. Matchbooks with things written on the underside of the flap, usually numbers of telephones, I suppose, curls of hair and all sorts of receipts, as well as other slips of paper they've used to mark the spot where they stopped. And they file correspondence between leaves as if a book were a slide drawer. Do they do that to their own books? Or they tuck snapshots, postcards, unused stamps into them, now and then a pressed bloom they stain. I've seen leaf shadows, $1 to $5 to $10 bills, you'd never guess. Yes, rubber bands, a shoelace, candy and gum wrappers, even their chewed gum that I have to pry out with a putty knife. People, I declare. And newspaper clippings, often the author's reviews, that are among the worst, intruders, because in time they'll sulfur the pages where they've been compressed, the way people who fall asleep on the grass of a summer morning leave their prints for the use of sorcerers like me to make our magic. I've seen those cardboard-colored shadows. Don't overload the truck. Her arm, as if it were all cloth, waved over the row of waiting books. When the reshelvers arrive, those that have been out in uncaring public hands, I hold up each volume up by its boards and shake it. Yes, just as if I were tipping a purse in a hunt for keys, and let the cellophane flutter forth, the strips of foil, all their nasty personal stuff spill out. It is not easy on the books, but their bodies are purged, and they will all be better for it. She gave Joseph an impish look. I talk to them, I do. When I repair a book, I tell it what the operation entails and how it won't hurt. They need to be shown some concern. She paused, as if in obedience to a script, as if she'd confessed these things before. They need talking to, not just reading from. She paused again. They need consolation. With such instructors, it didn't take Joseph long to learn the ropes, and he soon found, as he thought he would, that he had time on his hands. His dedication and energy enabled him to dispose of tasks as they appeared, and even when he looked for work by asking what he should do next, it was often accomplished more effectively than either patrons or staff expected. Through nearly all the hours he found free in his otherwise broken day, he read difficult books, those that would compel him to take notes. He checked out on his own card and took back to his rooms for concentrated study. This pass, a prize document, had his photo on it, and in hollow red letters said, staff. Time, too, became real, and its paradoxes fascinating. He had in hand, for instance, a book of Ruskin's, originally issued in 1850s. Meanwhile, Shaw and Shakespeare sat close by with volumes about them from every ensuing decade. Yet all of these works were here in the sight of his eye, so that he, Joseph Skizzen, might read Shaw before Shakespeare, Pinero before Sophocles, the little or the late before the long ago and very great. Because for him, the past, which he surely recognized and honored as historical, was as real right now as it once had been. The past was present in an altered form, of course, but Ruskin's words on Ruskin's page were the same as the day Ruskin wrote them, as was his dislike of geometric form, expressed by him with such conviction. In these fulminations, Euclid's tidy squares, his petty rounds and triangles, were set against the exfoliate nature and shape of plants, animals, and even men, as if the two realms were enemies, the abstract versus the organic, for the title in 15 rounds. This bout was as present to Joseph's mind as it might have been to one of Ruskin's immediate readers. The past is present on the page, he told Marjorie. This library is like the Savior. The whole dead world has risen and stands here as on the last day. Marjorie's smile was chaperoned by a pair of moist eyes. Thank you for your patience. Thank you.